Let me take you back in time. Picture the great Maya cities, once home to millions, their towering pyramids reaching toward the heavens. By the year 900, they stood silent, abandoned, the people who built them scattered into the jungle. What killed this mighty civilization? There was no invading army at the gates, no meteor from the sky. Instead, something far quieter crept through their world. Climate stress. A series of devastating droughts struck the Yucatan Peninsula. Crops failed, water ran dry. But here is the crucial part: the droughts alone did not destroy the Maya. It was what happened next. Trade networks crumbled as food became scarce, social trust evaporated as leaders failed to deliver on their promises of prosperity. Neighbors turned against neighbors. The entire system unraveled, thread by thread, until nothing remained but stone monuments in an empty forest. This pattern repeats throughout history. Angkor Wat, the largest pre-industrial city in the world, succumbed to similar pressures. The Bronze Age civilizations of the Eastern Mediterranean collapsed almost simultaneously around 1200 BCE, when climate shifts disrupted their interconnected trade networks. Historians and archaeologists have studied these downfalls for decades. But here is what we have failed to grasp until recently. These civilizations did not fall from a single blow. They experienced what researchers now call cascading systemic failures. One pressure compounded the next. Food insecurity led to civil unrest. Unrest broke down trade. Broken trade weakened governance, and on it went each failure making the next one more likely. Now consider our modern world. We have built something unprecedented in human history. A globally connected civilization with supply chains stretching across continents, just-in-time delivery systems, financial markets linked in milliseconds. This connectivity makes us incredibly resilient. In some ways, a crop failure in one region can be offset by imports from another, but it also creates dangerous vulnerabilities. When everything connects, failure in one place can ripple outward with astonishing speed. We saw a preview of this during the COVID pandemic. Empty shelves, disrupted supply chains, panic buying. And that was just one stressor. Climate change will bring many stressors all at once. The scientific community has largely avoided discussing these worst-case scenarios, not because they are unlikely, but because scientists fear being labeled alarmist. Yet the data keeps pointing in an unsettling direction. Human societies exist within a remarkably narrow climate niche. We have thrived in regions with average annual temperatures around 13 degrees Celsius. Current projections suggest we could see climates not experienced on Earth for 50 million years within the next century. That reversal of 50 million years of cooling would happen in just 200 years. The speed of this change matters more than anything. It took thousands of years for the Maya to build their civilization. It collapsed in decades. We have built ours over centuries. How long would it take to unravel? The global food web unravels. When you picture climate change, what comes to mind? Maybe wildfires raging across hillsides, or hurricanes tearing through coastal cities, perhaps a lonely polar bear on melting ice. These images are real and frightening. But there is a danger far more insidious that rarely makes the headlines. The threat to our ability to grow food. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Throughout history, when civilizations collapse, the cause is almost always the same: people cannot feed themselves. Take the late Bronze Age, around 1200 BCE. Several powerful Mediterranean civilizations crumbled within decades of each other. The Mycenaeans in Greece, the Hittites in Anatolia, the Kassites in Babylonia. Sediment samples tell us why a prolonged drought destroyed their crops. Famine spread. People fled their homes. War followed 2,000 years later. The Anasazi civilization in the American Southwest met the same fate. Extended drought and cooling made growing maize impossible. A once thriving society simply dissolved. And in our own time, Syria before the civil war erupted in 2011. The country endured 5 years of devastating drought. Crops withered, livestock died. Starving rural families flooded into cities, already strained by ethnic and political tensions. The rest is tragic history. Today, the stakes are immeasurably higher. Climate change now threatens agriculture on a truly global scale. Maize and wheat yields are projected to decline significantly in the coming decades. These two crops alone provide the foundation of human nutrition. Wheat supplies over 20% of all calories and protein consumed worldwide. Yet, even as yields fall, demand keeps rising. By 2050, we will need to feed 9.6 billion people. The Food and Agriculture Organization estimates we must increase food production by at least 60%. Some researchers say we need to double it. The math simply does not work. Add to this the crisis in our oceans. Warming waters and acidification are devastating fisheries that billions rely on for protein. The intricate web that connects farms, oceans, and dinner tables is starting to fray. When food becomes scarce, societies do not just go hungry, they unravel. Water scarcity and the geography of conflict. Let us talk about something fundamental: water. It is the resource we cannot live without, and yet we have built our entire civilization on a fragile assumption that it will always be there when we need it. Here the problem: our greatest civilizations emerged along fertile river valleys. The Nile, the Tigris, the Euphrates, the Indus. These were not random choices, they were calculations about survival. But now those same rivers are becoming flashpoints for something far more dangerous than any drought. Climate change is primarily a water crisis. That might sound strange when we talk about rising temperatures, but we feel those temperatures most acutely through water, through floods and droughts, through shrinking glaciers and contaminated aquifers. And here's where it gets complicated. The glaciers that feed many of the world's great river systems are disappearing. When they melt, they provide a temporary surge of water. But that surge is deceptive. It is like spending your savings account. Eventually, the money runs out, and when those glaciers are gone, the rivers they fed will become seasonal trickles. Now consider the geography of conflict. Upstream, nations control the water that downstream populations depend upon. In a warming world, that creates an explosive dynamic. Egypt watches Ethiopia build dams on the Nile with growing anxiety. Pakistan fears what India's water management decisions mean for its agricultural heartland. The Colorado River, which sustains millions in the American Southwest, has been shrinking for decades, but water scarcity does not just create international tension, it drives people from their homes. Before food systems even collapse, when a region can no longer sustain its population, people move. They become climate refugees, and that movement triggers its own cascade of problems. This is what security experts call a threat multiplier. Water scarcity worsens political tensions, which worsens economic instability, which drives migration, which creates border conflicts, which strains resources further. It is a vicious cycle, and we are already seeing it begin. Imagine waking up tomorrow and learning that your hometown has become unlivable, not because of war or economic collapse, but because the air itself has turned against you. This is not science fiction. By 2070, scientists predict that between 1 and 3 billion people could be living in zones that have simply become too hot for human survival. The culprit is something called wet bulb temperature. This measures not just heat but heat combined with humidity, when wet bulb temperatures reach 35 degrees Celsius. The human body can no longer cool itself by sweating. You could sit perfectly still in the shade with unlimited water, and you would still die within hours. Parts of South Asia, the Middle East and equatorial regions are approaching this threshold right now. In Bangladesh, the crisis has already begun. Villages like Kurigam have faced devastating floods for decades, but these disasters are intensifying. Rising sea levels contaminate freshwater with salt. Crops fail, homes wash away, many flee to Dhaka, a city already bursting at the seams with climate refugees by 2050. South Asia alone could see 40 million internal climate migrants, with 1/3 of them in Bangladesh. The story repeats across the globe. In Central America's dry corridor, farmers watch their crops wither under relentless drought. In Pacific Island nations like Tuvalu and Kiribati, saltwater intrusion poisons the land while rising seas swallow coastlines. These nations are quite literally disappearing beneath the waves. Yet here lies the cruelest irony of our global system. There is no such thing as a climate refugee under international law. A 1951 Refugee Convention was written for people fleeing persecution, not people fleeing a planet that has become hostile to human life. Climate migrants fall through every legal crack we have created. This legal vacuum will have profound consequences as millions cross borders seeking survival. Host nations will face impossible choices, resources will strain, tensions will rise. History shows us what happens next when people compete for scarce land. Water and food conflict follows. The displacement of billions could trigger the largest refugee crisis humanity has ever seen, and we have no framework to handle it. Imagine a ball sitting peacefully at the bottom of a valley. It stays there stable and unmoving because gravity holds it in place. But if you push that ball hard enough, it rolls up the slope, crosses the peak, and tumbles down into an entirely different valley. Once it crosses that ridge, there is no going back. The ball has found a new home, and nothing short of enormous effort will return it to where it started. This simple image explains one of the most terrifying concepts in climate science: tipping points. A climate tipping point is a threshold beyond which change becomes self-sustaining. Cross it, and the system shifts into an entirely new state, often with dramatic consequences that unfold over decades or centuries. The truly frightening part is that once we cross these thresholds, our actions become almost irrelevant. Even if we stopped all emissions tomorrow, the changes would continue on their own momentum. 20 years ago, scientists thought these tipping points would only trigger at around 4 degrees of warming. Today, we know better. Research now suggests that critical components of our climate system could tip at just over 1 degree of warming. We are already at 1.43 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Scientists have identified around 25 potential tipping points in Earth's climate system. The most concerning include the collapse of the West Antarctic and Greenland ice sheets, which together could raise sea levels by over 11 meters. Then there is the thawing of permafrost, which could release massive amounts of methane, a greenhouse gas far more potent than carbon dioxide. The Amazon rainforest could shift from carbon sink to carbon source. The Atlantic circulation system, which keeps Europe temperate, could shut down entirely. Here is what keeps researchers awake at night. These tipping points do not exist in isolation. Triggering one could activate others in a cascading effect, pushing Earth toward what scientists call a hothouse state. This would lock in conditions completely unlike anything human civilization has ever experienced. The window for prevention is rapidly closing. Some researchers believe we may have already crossed certain thresholds without realizing it. This is the true meaning of a point of no return, not a dramatic Hollywood moment, but a quiet threshold crossed while we were looking the other way.